Hi, everyone. I'm Chris, and I'm a mindset and change coach, speaker, and facilitator. If you have missed or would like access to any parts of the previous interview series, please find the description or the links in the description below. In today's video, we will look at how VQ profile is used to measure our mindsets. Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's this way to measure it, this how we value things. So I understand you have this tool that you call the VQ profile that can measure that, the biases and the strengths or assets. Can you give us an example? What it would be one example of somebody's bias and somebody's strength, his or her strength.
Sure. So we actually measure 36 different ways of thinking. 36. It's a mathematical rising out of the formal axiology and the assessment instrument that's called the Hartman Value Profile. So there are 36 different axiological perspectives, 36 different ways of thinking. And 100% of a person's thoughts, thinking, decisions, conscious and subconscious, as in habits, consciously or subconsciously are processed through one or some combination of these 36 different ways of thinking.
Mm.
One of those ways of thinking, as an example, is what we call handling problems. So it's looking at problems, and let's define a problem. A problem is something that's getting in the way of achieving something that we're trying to achieve, right? Or things going smoothly. And the perspective of handling problems is looking at those problems from a very practical and pragmatic way, what we call the extrinsic uh, perspective. Okay. Now, a person who overvalues that particular way of thinking, or the substance of what we're looking at there, and the elements of the problem, is somebody who's likely to see the problem as being much bigger than it actually is. Not only is it bigger, but it's also more urgent than it actually is in terms of the nature of the problem. And as a result, they're likely to drop things right away. I got to solve this problem. It's all about the problem, and sort of catastrophize the issue.
Mm.
Now, a person who undervalues that in the methodology of how the assessment works is likely to say, it's not that big a problem. We don't need to deal with it right now. But they're judging the value to be less of a problem than it actually is. Okay, so they're in both cases, they're inaccurate in their judgment of the magnitude and importance of the problem, and they're gonna
Mm.
in that interpretation will inform their behaviors, their choices, their actions relevant to that problem. And the person who undervalues it says, it's no big deal, no problem. But the problem's actually bigger, so it's going to fester and it might get worse and cost more and not get dealt with appropriately. Whereas a person who the assessment identifies that they have a really great ability to handle the problems is also somebody who will more accurately understand the magnitude of the problem, how big a problem it is, and from a practical standpoint, be better able to make decisions on what to do about the problem.
Mm.
And that's just one out of 36 different ways of thinking and how it can influence our thoughts and actions.
Mm.
Now, there's a little bit more complexity in that what I'm talking about is how that particular individual, whether they have it as a bias, over or undervalued, versus an asset, how they think about the problem. But in many cases, they have to deal with other people about the problem, right?
Mm.
Whether if they're a supervisor, then maybe they need to direct their people or get their people involved in it. or if they are somebody who is at a lower down, let's say, who identifies the problem, but now they got to go to the boss and ask them, what should we do with this problem? Now, what if the boss over or undervalues it and doesn't see it the same way? How do you reconcile this gap between what the employee sees as the problem and what the boss sees as the problem in order to solve the problem? So, and I'm only pointing to the fact that two people can see the same problem differently based on what we're able to measure in the assessment process. But we also give them a way to reconcile those issues by using their best ways of thinking rather than their biased ways of thinking.
Mm, okay. Okay. So just to recap, the example you are giving is somebody facing a problem and how he looks at the problem. A bias will be he undervalues the problem or he overvalues the problem.
Yeah. Both
And
cases, it's still a bias, right?
yeah, both cases with bias, and in order for him to resolve this with other people, he could look into an asset that he has perhaps on the profile or the report.
Yeah, and we define an asset as a way of thinking that measures out is already and very naturally aligned with the hierarchy of value. A way of thinking that you're able to make really good value judgments if you think that way. If you cause yourself, if you shift your perspective to that way of thinking, you're likely to make and immediately make much better judgments about things.
Okay. All right. Now let's move on to the next part, which is the neuro-axiology part. So we've been talking about axiology. So perhaps we switch a bit the next gear, which is the neuro-axiology part. So I understand that your company deals with neuro-axiology. So can you tell us a bit more about it and how or what does it add to axiology itself?
Yeah, sure. Pause.
Okay.
Okay, so what is neuroaxiology? We've been talking about axiology as a formal science and the ability to measure how people think. what my company is about and why we wrote the book called Answering the Central Question is for the last several decades, there's been more and more information coming out from the field of neuroscience about how people think. Behavioral science, cognitive neurosciences, emotional neuroscience, and perhaps most importantly, what's called neuroplasticity, and understanding the mechanics of how we learn and how the brain changes. And we started to think, well, it's all fine and good that we're able to measure value, we're able to measure how people think, but how do we use that information to help people think better? How can we teach people to engage their cognitive assets rather than fall victim to their cognitive biases and liabilities that tend to get us into trouble individually and collectively? And so there was all this new information coming out in neuroscience and the related scientists about how all that happens. What's interesting is a lot of it actually pointed to the same thing that Dr. Hartman was pointing to, and that is that brain functionality is fundamentally about wanting to create value, and part of that equation is not only to improve quality of life, pursue the things that we want that will improve quality of life, but also to avoid or eliminate pain. Two ends or two sides of the value proposition coin, if you will, right? And that people are motivated to create value and avoid pain. And even the learning process, we are much better at engaging ourselves in the process of learning things that we see value in learning. Okay? How many people in the world already know what they need to do to, let's say, lose 20 pounds, to lose weight, to be healthier? Okay? They already know.
Mm.
But how many people don't do it? Right?
Big percentage.
What's
Yeah.
what's the reason why they wouldn't do it? What do you think? Why do people not do what they know they quote should do?
They procrastinate. Uh,
What has them procrastinate?
um, why they procrastinate? Maybe they don't think it will work, or yeah.
Because they don't value
They
it. It's
don't
really
value it.
simple.
Yeah,
They
yeah. They
don't
don't
value
value
it enough. They
enough.
don't put it high enough, right?
Yeah.
That from a dieting standpoint, the value, that instant gratification value of that feel good, bad for you food, you know, uh, or the television program, instant gratification has greater value than the pain of having to suffer through exercise or to deny ourselves the pleasure of that McDonald's hamburger. Okay? It's really simple. We do the things that we value, we pursue the things that we value, and we avoid the things that we think don't have value or are going to take value away. Let's apply it to organization development. Let's talk about change management. Let's talk about learning and development. Okay? How many people have gone to course after course to learn a particular skill, but then, maybe they apply it for a couple of weeks and then they just go back to their old ways. Well, the reasons why we don't apply knowledge and skill is because we don't connect it to actual value. We don't judge that there's value in it. But those things that you do apply, it's because you see value in it. Really simple. Okay? It's just like it's the fundamental mechanism of the human mind and spirit. We value and disvalue, and that informs our choices and our actions. And here we have neuroscience that's revealing all of this, and we're understanding the mechanics of neuroplasticity. Like, it has to have value so that we're in action with enough deliberate practice and attention density to create change in the brain. We also know that people can literally change overnight through what are called aha moments or satori experiences, uh, often in response to things that happen in our life. And we fundamentally change, like the death of a loved one, the unexpected death of a loved one, which completely rocks our world, and we start to think differently. Our value structures start to change. Or when we fall in love, or when we have a baby, and all of a sudden what we thought was important isn't important anymore, right? And we change. Well, what if we could do that rather than reaction to life experiences? What if we could do that proactively? And neuroscience gave us an understanding of the mechanics of it, but then axiology, formal science, not just as a philosophy, but as a formal science, and Dr. Hartman's work gave us a way to understand value, quality of life, and a way to measure it. And it's putting these two things together that became a game changer that we wrote about. And in fact, Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and The 8th Habit and a number of other books, called this science a groundbreaking science for the difference it could make in the world. And by extension, of course, in individual lives, a fundamental shift in what life, love, and leadership are about. It's about creating value. One of the things that we talk about is that if you think about it in your own life, real success in life, both personally, individually, as well as organizationally, is not a function, it's not created by the value we get, but rather the value that we create. Value in all of its forms. The empathy that we give, the togetherness that we feel, the self-esteem and the esteem of others that we grant, the trust that we're able to have in each other, the innovations that we're able to create to cure things like cancer and COVID and poverty and hunger. That we can collaborate in ways that we can prevent war, let alone put an end to one. You know, these are all part and parcel of all of this, and that Dr. Hartman was able to give us. So, and the VQ profile is greatly informed by the combination of these sciences, so that we can not just measure all the different ways a person thinks relative to the hierarchy of value, but then teach them, coach them, train them how to bring more of their best thinking instantaneously to their life under any circumstance. Right? There's a process to it. You know, we need a certain amount of mindfulness to know when our B game is dominating us. Usually that's associated with some negative emotional responses like anger and upset and frustration or even procrastination. And then in those moments be able to shift into our best ways of thinking. But that's what Neuro-Axiology is about. And that's why, by the way, in the OD world, there's a Dr. Anton Shufutinsky is his name. He's one of the professors at Cabrini College here in the United States, in the Philadelphia area, and globally in their distance learning program. He's also the head of their MS-OD program. And he has called Neuro-Axiology a game changer for the field of organization development and all that encompasses. So learning and development, leadership development, succession planning, change management, all of that. It is a game changer.
Okay. Thanks very much, Peter, for sharing that. So neuroscience combination or neuroscience and axiology gives us Neuro-Axiology.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And with the tool that I think we mentioned, that the VQ profile, it allows us to measure scientifically how people think, and then apply that to help them be more effective. Thank you for watching. Please show your support by clicking subscribe and like if this video has added value to you and you have found it to be useful. I'll see you soon.